Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ease India's webinar today, and we'll just wait a few moments so that everyone joins in, and we'll be on our way soon. We have Lubna and Ishani, our speakers are already ready here, and we look forward to a lively session in the main meeting as well as in the chat box. Please introduce yourself in the chat and tell us where you're joining us from as we wait one more minute for some of our participants to join in. Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Greetings to you and welcome to the Ease India webinar today, where we'll be hearing about some insights from small journal editorial offices in India. And we have with us our speakers, Lubna Duggal and Ishani Debroy. I'm Anita Nagarajan. I'm the chair of Ease India, and I'm very happy to welcome Lubna and Ishani. And I look forward to hearing their experience here. Please put in your comments and questions in the chat box, and we'll be keeping track of them, responding to them either in the chat or we'll take them up during the Q&A at the end of the session. A warm welcome to our speakers today. Lubna Duggal is Associate Editor of Urbanization and a Senior Consultant at WordLab at the Indian Institute for Human Settlements. She's also the editorial staff of Ecology, Economy and Society and a working editor at the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics. It was a pleasure to meet her earlier this year at Bangalore. I had the chance to head over to IIHS and speak with her in person. Together with Lubna, we have Ishani Debroy. She's also Associate Editor of Urbanization and Senior Associate at the WordLab at IIHS. Ishani is on the editorial staff of Ecology, Economy and Society. Both our speakers today bring experience working behind the scenes in an action-packed environment of an editorial office. And I'm sure you can't wait to get started with this session. So I'm going to hand off to Ishani, and we hope you have a very interesting session here today. Over to you, Ishani.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you to Ease for organizing this. I will just share my screen really quickly. Thanks everyone for joining us today. So as Anita mentioned, Lubna and I work in an editorial office, and we are today bringing you our insights into what goes into running an editorial office, particularly in India and in an academic publishing context. So let's start by looking at who is involved in publishing a journal. Many of you may know that the most important people involved are editors, authors, and reviewers. But there is a whole ecosystem that goes behind publishing a journal. So today we'll be looking primarily at editors. There are different functions that editors play. You may recognize the titles of editor-in-chief and journal editors. So journal editors are usually the ones that make the major decisions in the publication of manuscripts, in the running of the journal. But then there are also editorial coordinators and managing editors who coordinate the publication process of the journal. Associate editors, assistant editors, and section editors support the journal editors in their work in the peer review process. Copy editors, as you may know, work with language. Production editors come in at the production stage to make the articles publishable. So this may sound like a lot of terms, but often these designations are quite fluid and people may perform more than one function at a time. And each editorial office usually functions differently. So coming to that, we'll be discussing what an editorial office is, But before we do that, we just wanted to get a sense of how many of you have worked in an editorial office or want to. Mary, could you pull up the first poll, please? If everyone can answer on their poll if they've worked in an editorial office. So while you answer that, an editorial office is a bridge essentially between the decision-making editors and authors, reviewers, and all other stakeholders involved in the publishing of a journal. So like you can see from our GIF, not hiring an editorial office team, we think is a mistake because that bridge is very important in ensuring the smooth publication of a journal or a publication. So the poll is in, and it seems that a lot of you have worked in one in the past and or currently work in one, which is great. So I'm sure you'll all find this to be familiar, and I hope you'll also chime in with your own experiences of working in them. And to the ones who've never worked in one, we hope you find this useful and interesting to learn about how an editorial office works. So let's look at the types of editorial offices and how they are structured differently. So the first type of office is one that works with a big publisher. So essentially, these are journals that are run wholly by a big publisher. For instance, you may know publishers like Sage, Wiley, Elsevier. So these journals are run by people who work on multiple journals at a time, and they are often professionally trained by the publisher themselves to work in these teams. The second type is a society or institutional journal. These are run typically based on a specific subject area or expertise. For instance, Ease has its own journal. Universities and institutions may have subject-specific journals run by departments or even by the faculty and the students themselves. Usually, these are smaller teams and they don't typically work with more than one or a few journals. And they may or may not have a lot of institutional support or a full-fledged team to work with. And then we have the mixed bag, which is partly managed in-house and partly working with an external publisher. So for instance, a society or an institution may have a small team of their own, but they may outsource certain functions like article management, handling their website, subscriptions, etc., to an external vendor or a publisher. So Lubna and I actually, we hold different functions in the different journals that we work in. So we are part of, as Anita mentioned, we are part of the IHS team Word Lab, which holds the editorial function of Urbanization. Urbanization is IHS's flagship journal. And this is an example of a mixed bag type of publication where we are the in-house team, but we work with an external publisher, which is Sage, to provide us with publication support. So the big publisher handles the post-production processes of the journal, whereas we handle the initial stages of article management and several other functions. The other journal that we work on as part of our work at IHS is the Ecology, Economy, and Society Journal, which is an INSEE journal. And this is published by a society, but the journal collaborates with IHS for its editorial office resources. This is an example of a society publisher that a society publication that is run with institutional support. This journal also uses the open journal system. Lubna is additionally also a working editor, which is also an associate editor with the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics. She works with the editorial coordinator on journal policies and publication platforms. I have previously worked with them as a copy editor as well. This is an example of a fully society-run journal. The journal has an in-house editorial office, but does not collaborate with an institution or any external publisher as such. So today, as you can see, we were looking at the small editorial office, since that's the experience that we have. And in the global south, it's often common to find these smaller journals that are run by small editorial offices. So just to give you a sense of what these offices are typically like. So like I said, there are fewer people and these few people play multiple roles. So you would handle, so for instance, we handle peer review, we handle the copy editing, we handle, some people handle the typesetting within the team. Often, people who are working in these smaller teams are also working in an institution and are playing other roles apart from managing the journal like us. They may not be professionally trained in the different aspects of the job. So often the learning happens on the job itself. And in the case of especially society-run journals, people are often working on a voluntary basis. And then limited resources also becomes a characteristic. For instance, access to article management systems is often different. So a big publisher such as Sage or Elsevier would have their proprietary article management system, whereas smaller journals, especially in countries in Asia, Latin America, and Africa, often use open source systems like OJS because they are free to use and not linked to any subscriptions. And the different tools that you need at the different stages of production, such as for article management, to track submissions, to copy edit, etc., they may all be individual and not connected to one cohesive system. So because of these two things, there's a possibility of longer timelines, right? Because there are fewer people, there are limited resources. So especially if journals have higher volumes of submissions, this can lead to longer timelines, and often because there's a lack of technical and human resources, this can also lead to delays. So today, Lubna and I, like I mentioned, we are bringing our experiences in working in these different offices. I started out my professional journey working in a copy editing firm. And so I used to work on the other side of publication, where I worked with authors trying to get published in journals. And I then joined this team where I'm working on the journal side of things. And Lubna started off her career working in another editorial office and has worked with multiple journals in different structures of editorial offices. So we see ourselves as primarily copy editors, and we're hoping that we can bring our experiences with learning how to manage journals and the skills required to do this to you. And we hope that our experiences also speak to other people working in the global south. So to get further into how journals run, let's look at the editorial office workflow, right? So I'll quickly take you through the different stages. Many of you may be familiar with this already. So at first, there is the submission stage, right? And here, the editorial office will need to look at the submission guidelines, whether a submission fits the guidelines, whether it meets the aims and scopes. You may have to conduct a plagiarism check at this point. You may have to do certain initial checks to make sure that all the information needed to take this article forward are in there. And you may also have to assign it to a section editor or associate editor who will be further reviewing this article. The next step is peer review. So at this point, you may need to assist the editors with identifying reviewers or providing them with a database in which they can look for reviewers. After this, you may need to communicate with reviewers and editors as to the timelines for the review, making sure that reviews come in on time. You may also need to check for the quality of reviews. In some cases, you may need to follow up with the reviewers if the review is not of a certain standard. Then when the revised manuscripts come in, this differs from journal to journal, but at different points, you may need to do further plagiarism checks, checking that the metadata is consistent and has not changed, etc. Then we come to copy editing. This could be in-house or outsourced, but it is useful to have an understanding of copy editing, even if you're not doing it yourself. At this point, you may need to coordinate with the copy editor or flag issues from the peer review stage that have not been addressed yet. And this is because copy editing is often the last stage in which major changes can be made to an article, right? At this point, since you work in the editorial office, you would have a better sense of the layout of the articles once published. So you may have to advise on how figures and tables should appear, how the sources of supplementary materials and figures may need to be cited, what are the copyright standards to be met, and also checking the completeness and correctness of all the metadata and author information that has been entered into the file or the system, right? The next stage, we have production. So this is also could be in-house or outsourced. So the typesetting may be done by the publisher, or you may be doing it in-house. At this point, you may check for glaring errors. You would check for that the layout and the design are consistent, that you're following the formatting guidelines. At this point, you'd also check things like the TOC, the table of contents, the page numbers, the headers and the footers. And often the editorial office is the last eyes on the proof. So it's the last chance to make any changes. So this is where right after this, the article goes out for publication. And here you may need to do final checks on all the things that go at the front and the back of an issue, the front matter, the back matter. You may need to check if DOIs are assigned properly and are in working condition. You may need to check that the cover pages are correct. The HTML and PDF versions of the files are rendering. And overall, you would need to coordinate at this point with various departments and stakeholders like the production department, the circulation, the editors, authors, reviewers, and any website updates that need to be made. So this is the end of the publication process, but the work of the editorial office doesn't end there. You may need to look at outreach. So this is to ensure that your journal articles are reaching the right audience. So at this point, you may think about planning for physical outreach at events and conferences. These may be designing pamphlets, posters, pitching the journal, making video content, and then, of course, digital outreach in the form of social media, webinars, and also thinking about things like video abstracts that are a bit more, that make articles a bit more accessible to people online. The other thing that you may need to look at are the journal policies. So every journal would have editorial policies that need to be adhered to. So one is to check that the policies are being adhered to, but also looking at whether these are up to date, by also keeping track of the developments in global scholarly publishing. And finally, there is reporting and documentation. So as the editorial office, you may need to update either the editors, the advisory board, or any other decision-making people who are running the journal. You may need to give them regular updates on how the journal is doing. You may need to track the trends and timelines of the journal, how long it takes for articles to be published, for example, how many submissions you're getting. You may need to assess the journal's performance, collect, analyze, and archive data, and also to audit the workflows and practices. This helps ensure that you're following an efficient process in publication. And finally, documenting the processes of the journal are also very important because it helps preserve the history of the journal and also enables easy transitions. It also serves as a ready reckoner for you at any point. So since there were quite a few of you who worked in an editorial office or have worked in one before, we'd really like to hear if we've missed any steps, since this was broadly from our experience of working in a journal. But if you've done any other tasks or any other steps in the process, please let us know in the chat box. We'd love to hear it. Yeah, and I hope this gave you a sense of the journal workflow and the role of the editorial office in running a journal. So just to reiterate, you may not need to do all of these things, but you may do one or a few of these different steps. I'm going to hand it over to Lubna now to talk about the skills required to do all of these tasks.
Thanks, Ishani. Thanks for giving us an overview of the editorial office. And now you have an idea of the various tasks required of an editorial office. We'll sort of get into the kind of skills and knowledge you need to work in one. But yeah, if you've missed out anything, please mention that in the chat, and we'd like to see what other things small editorial office team is doing. As people working in the domain of journal publishing, there are a few overarching skills that we all need to have, and you will notice how these will be applicable in the case of all the skills that we'll go ahead and discuss today. Mary, could you pull up the Zoom whiteboard? We have a little exercise for you. You've gone through the workflow, and we'd like to hear from you what kind of skills do you think are required to work within an editorial office. There are sticky notes in the whiteboard. So yeah, you can just click on that and add in your comments over there. While you do that, so the overarching skills that I was basically talking about, quality control in a sense is one of the most important aspects of scholarly publishing. So as copy editors, the skills of attention to detail, pattern recognition, these are something that you either have a proclivity towards or you're trained for this. These are both very important to maintain quality control in publishing. And the other skill to have, I suppose, is the quality of patience and persistence. The publication cycle of scholarly journals can often be a long and very tedious process, and persistence comes in handy when dealing with editors, authors, and reviewers in particular. Yeah, do we have any sticky notes in the chat? Okay. All right, so I'm going to keep an eye on what you put in the chat box, but meanwhile, I'm just going to start talking about the skills. So we've sort of split the kinds of skills required in running an editorial office into 5 buckets, and we'll explore each one in some detail. Is everyone able to see the slides at this point, or can you only see the
So I can't share my screen while the whiteboard.
The whiteboard is on. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I see there's something called, somebody said effective communication with all the stakeholders. Someone said salary negotiation or freelance payment negotiation is particularly difficult. Swati is saying that scientific writing, awareness on the publication process, that's important. All right. So thanks for your responses. Maybe we'll go on back to the presentation now. Swati's also mentioned English language and grammar skills. So great, we're going to cover all of these and speak to you about them. Ishani, if you can reshare the presentation. Like I said, that we split the kind of skills required into 5 buckets. The first of these is subject and language knowledge. Like Swati also mentioned right now. So this would mean that you'd need to have some knowledge of the academic field of your journal. This is always helpful, knowing the subfields, the theories, the jargons, and the concepts that emerge from these fields, knowing what's new in the field, what are the methods or approaches, particular approaches to research, whether your field deals with more of quantitative or qualitative research. Familiarity with the article formats prevalent in the field is also needed. So, for example, clinical trials, case studies would be common to STEM journals, while journals also publish non-peer review formats like commentaries, book reviews, visual essay, or photo essays, right? Also, a knowledge of the scholar profiles in the field is helpful. So knowing the kinds of authors and institutions that may submit to your journal is helpful in commissioning or recognizing what sort of submissions are coming in, as well as who may be best placed to review your manuscripts. The second thing under this bucket is academic writing. So familiarity with structures of academic writing can help us in many ways in identifying missing sections, what makes for a good or a bad abstract, whether the keywords provided are relevant, what information is required in the method section, depending on what method the manuscript is using, whether the discussion section is speaking to the findings, or whether the conclusions match the objectives that the manuscript had set out. The academic language is another piece. So it's by nature, it's formal, objective, critical. It has its own vocabularies and grammar and certain kinds of expressions that are used. And these things should be familiar to you while working in the editorial office. Referencing is a key sort of cornerstone of scholarly publication. And this is when knowing when and where citations are required in a manuscript, as well as what kinds of sources there are. So we have, of course, have journal articles and books, but there are fields where citation of archival materials is more common, or citations of acts, laws, and judgments are more common. The next thing is language and form. So on the language and grammar side of things, knowledge of style guides is important. And different ones are used by different fields, such as the MLA style for humanities, APA or Chicago style for the social sciences. And publications, in addition, may have their own style guides and may have exceptions to these style guides, exception to the rules of these style guides as well. And then on copy editing, so whether you're a copy editor and managing copy editing in-house, or you're not and you're outsourcing this, knowing all about how track changes, comments work, and liaising with authors and copy editors are skills that are required. As Ishani had mentioned, this is the last stage at which major changes can be done. So overseeing how the manuscript is finalized at this stage is pretty important. We'll go on to the next bucket of skills, which is publishing knowledge. Now, there are various kinds of policies that a journal has to follow. There's editorial policies, which cover your submission guidelines, submission and peer review processes and timelines, article types, word counts, periodicity of your journal, special issue guidelines, authorship considerations, plagiarism, AI usage, or policies on that. Then you have copyright and privacy policies. Copyright policies apply to both the journal as well as the authors. There are forms associated with these that the authors have to fill up. There are icons or labels, like, for example, those of Creative Commons that would need to be applied to a published article if you're using that license. And then you have privacy policies for how data is collected and managed on your submission platform or any other website connected to the journal. If your article has article processing charge, if your journal has article processing charges or is a subscription-based journal, you'll have separate policies again for these and for the payment systems, how you manage APC waivers, payment refund, shipping of print copies, etc. Next up is the knowledge of publishing ethics and standards. Having an idea of what research ethics encompasses, that the conduct of research should be done in an honest, transparent, and accountable manner, and how this translates into the manuscripts that you receive is important. So this is heavily intertwined with publication ethics, which then applies to the publication process itself, whether it's plagiarism, use of AI, misconduct in and manipulation of various facets such as authorship, the reported data, peer review process, declaration of previous publications, conflict of interest, personal, professional, or financial in nature. And so in order to uphold the integrity of scholarly publication, there are various standards that exist, and many are being continuously worked on and introduced. So knowledge of and compliance with these are necessary to ensure that your journals stay trusted in the academic community. So whether it's having your unique identifiers in place, like ISSN for the journal, DOI for the article, ORCID for the various authors, ROR for the authors' affiliations, or if it's complying with requirements in your region. In India, for example, subscription journals are considered periodicals and required to be registered with the Registrar of Newspapers and receive their own unique RNI number. Then your knowledge on publishing should also include technical proficiency. Most journals now accept submissions via submission platforms. Ishani's mentioned there's different kinds: proprietary, open source. These can be either customized to your workflows, or at times you would need to adapt your workflows around working with these systems. And with online publishing on websites, knowledge of basic HTML also often comes in handy. And apart from submission platforms, there are allied softwares and tools you'll be using or come across at various stages of publishing. So know-how of these is pretty necessary. So word processors, typesetting software, Excel, data analysis tools, plagiarism and AI checkers, design tools, emailing and content management services, and social media platforms where you do your outreach. Moving on to the next bucket, now to put all of this knowledge into practice and to ensure that you're getting your journal issues out, you need to be skilled in organization and management practices. So the management of the publication process is an essential skill and requires tracking of the entire cycle of publication, keeping aware of timelines, your publishing calendar, and maintaining enough buffer periods to account for delays, because they do happen. And maintaining your stated periodicity of your journals is also important to getting indexed. And maintaining your status with the indexing agencies. So you need to ensure that no steps are missed, especially when you're outsourcing multiple tasks to, freelance, say, copy editors, typewriters, printers, etc. Right. Also, you need to make sure that you have a sufficient pipeline of articles for future issues. Then moving on to peer review management. So during peer review process, aside from maintaining timelines, you need to ensure that all your stakeholders in the process, the editors who are assigning reviewers, the authors, and the reviewer themselves are complying with your peer review policies. So whether you follow an open, single anonymized, or a double anonymized model, and also keeping an eye on the quality of review comments that come in, and the revisions that authors make to the manuscripts on the basis of that. Post-publication and otherwise, you may also need to manage your outreach for the journal. So there's planning for digital, physical outreach, and this needs to be done in advance, ensuring that you have social media posts or mailers ready to go up once your articles or issues get published. You may want to have posters, pamphlets designed and printed for physical outreach, which you may want to distribute at conferences, send off with your editors, etc. Our penultimate skill bucket is data and reporting. So outside of the publication cycle, you are also managing data and reporting. There's a slew of databases that you may need to create and maintain. Author databases, reviewers, databases of readers, subscribers, mailing lists. You'll be collecting data such as what your citations, views, downloads are, what the geographical distribution of your submissions and published authors are. Your editorial activity would also need to be tracked. So your acceptance rate, your time to decision, time to publish, etc. And of course, you will be dealing with many files, including various trackers, databases, manuscript files at various stages, copyright forms, contracts with vendors, and these would all need to be appropriately organized and stored safely. Next up is that your published data, and that is your articles, would also need to be safely archived and indexed. And there are indexing agencies that have varied requirements. So depending on the systems or tools you use, you might be automatically or manually making deposits of your publication metadata and say you're depositing your references with agencies like Crossref, Directory of Open Access Journals, if you're members with them. Having a long-term preservation and archival plan in place is important. So there are various libraries, archives, agencies doing this, and ensuring that your sort of journal does not disappear if your website ups and crashes one day. Then reporting is a major part of the task of the editorial office. So the data that you've been collecting, analyzing it to glean how your journal is doing, reporting this to your stakeholders, knowing how to use various tools to analyze your data, using the right metrics, ensuring that you're not skewing your results, and compiling them in the form of regular reports, whether annual, quarterly, monthly, to your editors, advisory board, your society, publisher. Doing this keeps everyone on the same page and helps you spot and keep track of any issues that may come up with the journal. And our last bucket of skills is communications. This is a constant thing. You're always communicating in some form or the other with your stakeholders, whether it's your authors, reviewers, editors, readers, subscribers, publishers, vendors, copy editors, typesetters, printers, librarians, etc. Having timely and polite and professional communication is central to keeping things running smoothly. Here's where that persistence and patience we spoke about earlier comes in use the most. You may expect frustration as communication delays in one process can have a domino effect and derail subsequent processes, but your communication tone needs to remain professional, and keeping email templates handy can ease this process out for you. So maintaining relationships across the stakeholders we've mentioned becomes important, and timely communication and regular reporting helps. For example, you know, say how many book reviews need to be in your upcoming journal issue, and according to your publication calendar, if say 21st August was when all the book reviews should have come in and they haven't, flagging this to your editors in a timely fashion will help make sure that you can fulfill your pipeline. Next up is the other side of communication, which is media, design, marketing, and promotion. The image of the journal that you want to project and the tone of all your public-facing communication should be intentional and consistent, as should the branding, your logos, color palette, fonts, etc., consistent across print and digital media for good recall value. Knowing who your audience is and targeting your outreach accordingly. For example, deciding on where you may want to advertise your journal is important. Also, some basic knowledge of search engine optimization, SEO, can go a long way to ensure that search engines can find and index your article. So whether you're managing the website on your own, or a website developer is doing this for you, having enough knowledge to ensure that this has been accounted for makes a big difference. Now, this was the last bucket of skills, but before we close, we'd like to sort of contextualize all the information we presented to where we are located, which is the Global South. And there are two parts to this that we want to consider. The first is that academic publishing has historically been dominated by and centered in the Global North, but the Global South is fast catching up with journals increasingly being published from the South, manuscript submissions increasing rapidly from here. And there are, of course, attendant concerns that emerge, such as concerns around quality of manuscripts and research, high levels of rejections that these manuscripts face. And this is often compounded by the pressure to publish, which comes from universities and institutions. That's another conversation, but as editorial offices embedded in the very location the manuscripts are emerging from, we are uniquely placed to aid Global South authors. We understand better the use of English by non-native speakers of the language, from grammar and usage issues like, and these are quite particular to the Indian context as well, misplaced uses of the, overuse of the term very, and the ing form of verbs. So you have that at one end, to awkwardly written text due to having limited vocabulary and using more generic terms instead of specific synonyms to provide clarity to arguments being made, or there are considerations for local cultural sensitivities and how these are brought out in language. So all of these things may make what is otherwise very compelling argument or an idea seem weak instead. Further, there's limited permeation of knowledge of best practices and scholarly research, writing and publishing beyond the well-funded and premier institutions in the country. And so as editors situated here, we're well placed to provide that extra support that may be needed by the emerging early career researcher, the researcher from an underrepresented area of field, or even the activist or practitioner trying to write from experience rather than theory. So that was one part of what we wanted to highlight. The other part is concerning access to the knowledge of existing and emerging technology in scholarly publishing and access to human and financial resources. Ishani had mentioned how small editorial offices struggle with lack of funding, limited resources, and often depend heavily on time volunteer to maintain journal standards, especially when it comes to small society journals. It's also known that research, especially in social sciences and humanities, is not adequately funded in the country. And the accompanying global push happening towards open, transparent science, as well as the strengthening of research integrity, all good things, but also increase burden of compliance in, especially within a resource constrained setting. So whether it's tracking and reporting more data with each article published, figuring out how you're going to put up submission date, accepted date, publication date, how systems pull this data automatically, enabling the peer review, open peer review or post-publication peer review models, which are gaining traction, but submission platforms haven't been able to catch up at the same rate. Ensuring that your metadata citations are formatted to be accessible to various agencies that index or disseminate them. There's a lot of background work that goes into this. Keeping up with AI use, making policies, processes around that, and even ensuring that your policies keep up with whatever's the latest in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and sustainability goals. Memberships to various organizations like Crossref and associations that work towards these ends also have associated costs, as would any upskilling of editors and editorial offices that would be needed. So a lot of this is also technology dependent, which again, smaller journals and editorial offices may struggle to keep up with. So where proprietary submission platforms enable seamless integration of all your requirements. For example, with our journal that's published by Sage, there's an automated preparation of a peer review ready PDF proof which would otherwise require manually preparing these files, especially when you have to anonymize, remove document properties, etc. Or having your plagiarism checkers like Turnitin or Authenticate integrated into the system. And in fact, smaller journals would be precluded from using these due to these being expensive. And they have to then depend on free tools instead. Same goes for editing software like Perfectit, typesetting software like InDesign. These all have paid licenses or subscriptions, and smaller journals end up using open source alternatives like Scribus or even Microsoft Word to typeset. So what also happens is while these open source or cheap alternatives are around and quite accessible, this often comes with a learning curve and require you to be a bit more tech savvy to learn them. Right, so that's about all. And we hope this session sort of provided you with an exhaustive picture of the various skills you may need to have in hand while working within a small editorial office with patience, persistence, attention to detail, and recognizing patterns. Whether you yourself perform these functions or you have to oversee others who perform them. And what is very helpful is organizations like EASE, COPE, Committee of Publication Ethics, ISMTE, the Society for Managing and Technical Editors, and many others have very useful resources that are available online, guidelines, flowcharts, webinars, visualization, checklists across all of these topics that you can refer to for more detailed information on specific aspects. We hope to share links to some of these resources with you along with the presentation later. Right, so that's all from us. Anita, I think we can open this up for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Lubna and Ishani, for your presentation. I've invited questions in the chat or in the Q&A. If our attendees have questions, please post them in the chat box. Meanwhile, I'll read out a few questions that we already have. So one question is about quality control. Is that typically done within the editorial office in-house, or is it outsourced to an agency in this particular case? Lubna or Ishani, would you like to take that question?
Right. So quality control actually happens at all stages of publication, right? Right from when you receive a submission. So making sure that all the metadata is in place, it's following your submission guidelines. So there's quality checks at that level. There's quality checks on language when you're copy editing. When peer reviewers' comments come in, you're making sure that the comments are of a certain quality. So you're doing quality checks. So a lot of this is happening while you're doing taking forward the manuscript through these processes. So you are basically ensuring that the quality stays strong throughout the publication process. So when we were referring to quality checks, this is what we sort of meant. On the other hand, you have various tools and various things that ensure research integrity. So you have DOIs, which sort of help you then, you're not manually ascertaining whether a submitting author is who they say they are. If their ORCID ID is linked, then, they're sort of verified and vetted. So there are those tools that sort of help you with keeping quality checks. Anita, you think noted.
Sorry, I'll tie that to another question that I had on given the entire workflow and the different components that you showed, they were numerous, and given that we're talking about small journal and small teams that are handling all of this, which chunks are typically outsourced to agencies or freelancers? And what tasks or modules are typically done in-house for different reasons, maybe privacy, management of data, or maybe because you have access to tools in-house?
Ishani, you want to know that?
Sure. Yeah, so I think most commonly copy editing and typesetting are outsourced since this is at the final stage of the process. But we also know that publishers also offer services to take on things like article management, running plagiarism check, etc. But those are more expensive. So depending on the budget and size of the editorial office, it would depend on that. But for the two journals that we work on, we typically work on the full submission and peer review process, whereas the last few stages are handled by external vendors. Lubna, anything to add?
Yeah, there's also a circulation subscription. So, for example, with urbanization, and Sage manages a lot of those processes. They have also things like copyright policy, etc. They have certain standards already set in place. So, we don't have to think too much about that. Copyright forms already out there. So, yeah, those aspects also. So, when you're working with a big publisher, there's a lot that can is managed by them, and you can concentrate more on looking at the manuscripts themselves.
Thank you. There's one question in the Q&A box, and Lubna or Ishani, either of you could take it. In what specific ways has AI transformed your editorial workflow? Is ease bullish on these emerging technologies? I'll leave the ease for a slightly later point of time, but if you could tell us whether AI has transformed your workflow within your editorial offices, and how do you balance between efficiency and editorial integrity?
Okay, so then also this depends on how you define AIs, right? So AI, when it's like algorithmic processes, a lot of submission systems, platforms use it in various ways to sort of make those mundane processes of checks, etc., simpler. So that's one way. In another way, I think generative AI has really helped us. When you're really angry at an author or a reviewer, you just put your email into ChatGPT and ask it to make it more polite. I think that's where we most use AI. Also, we use Turnitin to do plagiarism checks, and that has an AI component, although the AI checkers, etc., are still not very robust. So we take these results with a pinch of salt.
Okay, thank you, Lubna, for that question. I see a comment that says one cannot acquire all the skills at a time. It is sequential. Maybe one can start with handling reviewers and then move to mediation between copy. Okay, Nandan, thank you for that comment. And if you'd like to add anything to that, Lubna and Ishani. And also a pressing question that I have is, what is the size of your team, right? I mean, there's all of these things that you do in-house. And maybe even if some of your work is handed over to agencies, there is still the additional task of managing communication with them and perhaps setting mutual agreements on what the standards that are acceptable and other requirements from your journal perspective. So what is the size of your team, and what are these skills that how does a new team member start acquiring certain skills? Are there defined roles that you can have only a certain set of skills, or in a small office, do you need to be able to jump from one task to another more quickly and therefore pick up several skills?
I think it's a mishmash of things. So for Organization Journal, it's me and Ishani working on it. We had another colleague who recently left, and that has created much upheaval. We've had to divide tasks between ourselves. But what we also try to do is make sure that all of us learn different. So on a daily basis, for example, Ishani is managing the peer review process, and say I'm managing more of the copy editing. But we make sure to switch tasks. These can become really mundane. So to also learn and make sure if one of us is not there. So again, with smaller teams, with like a bigger publisher, there's somebody always ready to step in. there's a backup plan. But with a small team, say Ishani's not around, I would know how to manage the peer review process. She'd know how to manage the copy editing process. So that's how we sort of make it work. And the other point we had mentioned about a lot of voluntary work. So Nandan, what put the comment in the chat box, works with us on ecology, economy, and society. He's one of the associate editors there and puts in a lot of voluntary work to help with typesetting for the journal, and basically taking care of the management system, etc. So yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah, Shani.
No, like a point we had mentioned in the presentation was about auditing and documentation, and I think that's really helped us, document the very granular level of tasks that we do at every stage. Because since we are dividing the process sort of between us, if you haven't done a task in many months, you may not remember exactly what goes into everything. So it really helps to have everything documented, even though it is a tedious process just to document things. It really helps later when you can just go refer to it.
Yeah, among other things, it took us over a year to do an complete audit of our journal, and we've created an exhaustive document that we can go back to and sort of, and anybody joining new can sort of look at this document and just know how the journal then works. So having these kind of things in place sort of helps deal with how these things pan out.
Oh, well, yeah. That must be very detailed work, the documentation that you have, the knowledge management, as it is called in some sectors, is important in small offices, I think. I'm looking at the chat box to see if there's any question that I have missed. If anyone has any questions, yeah, Mary says they have done something similar at ease because it's a small team and lots of work. Yeah, okay. Swati has a question on, can you tell me if there are any courses, workshops, or any other ways to learn to manage data with respect to editing and quality assessment? So, yeah, Swati, there are several resources. Lubna, would you like to point out any resource from your perspective here to respond to Swati's question, what you use in-house?
So I'm a bit not clear about managing data with respect to editing would mean.
Swati, are you talking about managing the data, or are you talking, is your question about how to use resources for good quality editing and assessment of quality? If you could clarify, quality assessment. Her question is about quality assessment of editing, I think. So how do you do that, and of the edited content? Yeah.
I suppose there's a lot of courses out there, and doing refreshers sort of even helps. I remember I had a couple of years ago attended the East School for Editing that Yatindra had put together, and that really helped me. I had not done too much learning over the years that I've been doing editing, and that sort of refreshed my memory and all the rules and exceptions, and what's also it gives you a sense of what's new. So EASE has, of course, that training course.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're about doing very well on time. We're just at the hour now. Thank you, Lubna and Ishani, for a very useful presentation. And thank you to our participants for their questions, comments, and active listening during this session. There are several resources available on the EASE website. And we will also share a recording of today's presentation with you. Yatindra has a note for Swati. If you're talking about the quality of the copy editing, he may have some resources to share with you. Please write to him. And please join us at other EASE events. Mary has posted the information about upcoming EASE events. Our next EASE India webinar will be in November. It's on clinical trials. And if you're, we will share more information about it in the coming days. Yes, yeah. Thank you, Mary. Mary will add all the forthcoming events to the email that you will receive together with the recording. Thank you, Lubna, Ishani, and we look forward to seeing all of you at another EASE event very soon. Thank you.